Let's make a Tan co-host. And I'll make Andrew a co-host too, in case he wants to show something. So welcome everybody to this combined Sunday afternoon group that we started some 7 weeks ago after the horrific events of October the 7th. Aandro, who heads the Global Leaders Group from around the world, the fifth state, as he says, of Israel, has joined with me, and Atan and I have travelled backwards and forwards to Israel on, 7, 8, 9 occasions, and we lose track after a while, taking particularly business people to see all the wonderful technical advances and meet with the people, have Shabbat with rabbis and get to know the culture. And we've been fortunate to be blessed by having many wonderful relationships, both from governmental levels through to high tech, through to, just some of the family leaders, the rabbinical leaders and other leaders that we've come across, the medical leaders. And as some of you would know, we've had, people like Major Daniel Jacob on, who's at the forefront of the Gaza Strip, leading a group of 500 every night into the battle zone, plus many other diplomats and experts of what is going on over there. And it's our great pleasure today to first of all welcome Andrew Woolas, MP. Andrew, we've met recently a few times over Zoom calls and things. Andrew is a member of Parliament up on the Sunshine Coast. So welcome, Andrew. And
thanks.
Andrew and the rabbi and I have been having conversations with Josh Reinstein from ICAJ about reforming what was the Friends of Israel parliamentary group into the Israel Allies Caucus. So welcome, Andrew. It's great to have you with us. On Sunday afternoons, we get, what do we call them, a motley mob of sheep who come along from all sorts of different places around Australia and around New Zealand as well, and countries. And we then do post, with everybody's permission, we post the recording up on the Monday, and we find a lot of people are watching the recordings because they can't get off Sunday afternoons. But welcome to you, Andrew, and perhaps start with just giving us a bit of your story, Andrew, where you've come to, how long you've been up there and you're getting into Parliament.
Well, thanks, John, and thanks to everybody for coming online. Can you hear me okay?
All good.
Okay, great. Well, look, my journey has been an interesting one. It's probably one that is a little bit road less travelled when you look at the broader scheme of things these days. But when I left school in 1985, I was educated by the Woolas brothers in Mentone in Victoria. And I went in my gap year. I worked as a volunteer for them in setting up a youth crisis centre in Mordialloc in the southeastern suburbs in Victoria. And the following year, I joined a Palatine monastery with a view to become an ordained Catholic missionary. And it didn't take them long to realise that I wasn't made for that sort of a lifestyle. And I got the DCM, the Don't Come Monday. They suggested that I wouldn't be able to fulfil my vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And some 35 years later, I can say that they were absolutely right. So I went back home to my parents' place, and I was quite distressed because I had made a decision in myself to give my life to the service of others through the church, and I felt that's where I was being called, and only, I was only 19 at the time, so it was pretty hard for a young fella to take that news. Where I lived, in the monastery in which I lived, it was built for 100 students, and at the time that I was going through, I think there were 5 of us. So I knew they were down on numbers, significantly down on numbers, clearly. But only to sort of get that rejection. I felt that very, very keenly. I felt that very deeply. But my old boss, Walter Sylvester, who was the rector of the monastery, he just said, look, Wally, they used to call me Wally, they still do. There's many ways that you can serve God. You don't have to be a priest to do that. So I then went home, and my backside hadn't hit the kitchen stool, and my mum said, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I don't know, I've got no idea. And she said, well, why don't you do a carpentry apprenticeship? And I gave her every reason under the sun why I couldn't do that. I didn't know anybody, blah, 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 blah. And she just sort of, as mums want to do, she slammed the phone book down in front of me and said, start ringing, because you're not going to be, bludging around here. And she said, your grandfather donated a library of books when he was alive to the master builders in Victoria. Give them a call. And I did. And I had an apprenticeship that afternoon. And that started the journey of a 10-year building career. So I did my apprenticeship in Victoria, started building, a subcontract initially. I then moved to Queensland in about 1993. With my wife and our eldest daughter, who was then 12 months old. And I built in Queensland for a number of years. And then I decided to go to university and study law full-time. And that was an interesting experience, but I enjoyed it so much, I stopped working and decided to concentrate on trying to get through my degree as quickly as I could. At that stage, we had 3 children. So my older girls described that as the time in our lives when we were poor. We didn't have 2 shekels to rub together. And so went to university. Because I'd worked for myself for 10 years, the best part of 10 years, I felt like I just didn't want to go through the ordinary articles of clerkship with a law firm. So I decided that I would hang my shingle out as a barrister. So I went straight from university to being a barrister. And I practiced as a barrister for 16 years. And then I was elected to the federal parliament in 2016 after a couple of unsuccessful tilts for pre-selection for the Liberal National Party. So I won pre-selection in 2016, which was my 3rd time around, so 3rd time lucky. And I've been in the federal parliament ever since. And to me, it is the greatest honour of my life. I've got to do many things in my journey as an MP. I've got to do a lot with our Defence Force. I was the 31st Speaker of the House of Representatives for a very short while in the dying days of the Morrison government, which was a great honour. But more recently, I've been invited to head the Israel Allies Caucus, and I was asked to go to New York in September of this year. So I was representing the Australian Parliament at the United Nations General Assembly. So I was over there for 6 weeks. And of course, October 7 hit. And, really, I think, had a profound impact on me, as it did for many people. But I have, I live with Julie and Lisa in Canberra. I have always felt a strong affinity as a Christian with the Jewish people. And to see what we were witnessing on October 7, and in the US, the TV coverage on CNN was just wall-to-wall coverage of. In the early days, CNN were quite sympathetic to the Jewish people and what had happened on October 7. But it was for those of you and looking from what I can see, many of you have been around a bit longer than I have, but it reminded me of the Desert Storm 1 and Desert Storm 2. It was just wall to wall, 24/7 media coverage of October 7 and the attacks on Israel. And the coverage, the video footage in particular that they showed in the US was much more graphic than what we've seen here in Australia. I'm not sure whether that's a cultural decision on the part of the networks here or whether it's a regulatory sort of situation. I think the US are much more inclined to be much more graphic in their portrayal of what's happening from a violence perspective, but they're much more conservative when it comes to sexual matters, whereas I think in Australia we're the exact opposite. But I just felt very moved by that, and when I was invited to sort of re-enliven the Israel Allies Caucus, I felt that that's one thing that I could do to do my bit, however small that might be, to engender support amongst Australians and to show solidarity with our Jewish friends. Like many of you, I'm sure, I've been appalled with what has happened in Australia following October 7 with the demonstrations and the carry-on of some Australian people, particularly in our education sector and the left of politics. And I think that unless, it's the old saying, evil happens when good men do nothing. I think it's incumbent upon us, irrespective of what your faith beliefs are, to stand up and say, no, we said never again, and we meant that. And I remember, I think one of the things that shaped me as a young man was reading Schindler's Ark when in Year 12, and for English, and that had a significant impact on me. And then the book was made into a movie some years later, and my wife Leonie and I went to the movies and watched what was then called Schindler's List. I think it was one way or the other, yeah. And everybody was at the end. Everybody was leaving, and I couldn't leave. I felt like someone had thrown a wet blanket over me, and I was sobbing. Mm-hmm. And I was very emotional, and to this day it sort of makes me emotional again, just how human beings could do that to fellow human beings was just beyond me. And I now, in one of my jobs in the Parliament, is I'm the Deputy Chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. So we receive briefings up to top secret level from our security and intelligence agencies on everything that's happening both domestically and abroad. And, that is a very confronting job often, but someone's got to do it. And I'm the Deputy Chair, so you've got to step up. And the Israeli ambassador offered the committee a few weeks ago a briefing and a viewing of the 43-minute compilation video of the attacks on October 7. And it's 43 minutes of my life I'll never get back. Yeah. When I was a barrister, I acted as counsel assisting the coroner in a number of deaths, and I've seen my fair share of death and carnage, but nothing could prepare me for that video. The sheer brutality and barbarity of that, of what happened by Hamas terrorists on that day. And I've said this a number of times since, that I can live psychologically with the death and carnage, but what really had a profound impact on me was watching innocent, often kids, being loaded into the back of the truck. Some were bloody, beaten, some had been maimed from grenades and bullet wounds, etc. But literally being thrown in the back of trucks like they were dogs. And those people being driven back into Gaza to the absolute cries of sheer delight, not just of the Hamas terrorists, but of the civilian population. And I think I've found that harder to deal with. We talk about Hamas terrorists, but and I'm not suggesting that all Palestinians are bad people. I'm not suggesting that for a second. But there was absolute delight when those innocent civilians were brought in as hostages into Gaza. And I think that'll probably stay with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it was a terrible, terrible. And one that we don't hear about. Great, interesting, Andrew. I could ask some questions about your school life and all other things, but I won't. I'll go keep on the topic. And just to say to people that the Israel Allies Caucus is open to left and right members of Parliament. Anybody who has a heart to support Israel and its right as a nation, as they should do, can be a member. And Andrew's going to head that up, and Rabbi and I and a few others are going to be announcing next year that we as SCAFI, Southern Cross Alliance for Israel, will actually be a supporter to the Israel Allies Caucus and start a foundation so that we can help and assist both raising finances and liaising with parliamentarians, education where possible, to both, to those who want it, and to increase our ability to influence the different stages of culture. A quick question, Andrew, and somebody else, we might get room for another one, I think it's but a quick question from me is, just yesterday, I think, Penny Wong has gone back to announcing that the Australian Labor Party will be calling Gaza and the West Bank as occupied territories. So that is now to be the terminology, and East Jerusalem will no longer be recognised as the capital of Israel. Did you hear this, and what are your comments?
No, I didn't hear that, John. I missed that, to be honest. So I'll need some time to sort of absorb that. I can't say it surprises me, to be honest. The left side of politics is, they're at war with themselves on this issue. They've got the hard left trying to, which are in effect being pulled to the even harder to the left by the Greens. You've got a very small number of people on the right who are trying to hold the ground in the Labor Party, but it's disappointing. It's disappointing.
Yeah. Well, that was I only found out last night. I think Rowan Dean did a segment on it on Sky News. So we'll investigate that. Itan, you've got.
Well, that would be worthy of further investigation if I could leave it at that.
Yep, shall do.
Thank you. First, thanks so much, Andrew, for attending the meeting today and contributing your view in these few minutes. I'm sure we could hear you much longer and understand more your responses, and also sitting around table in the caucus is something that would be really of interest to all, to hear responses at the House, which I think is, I just shared some time with this week, before I went to Tasmania, with your friend and predecessor in the UN, Mitch Fifield. And
right.
Sure. And we're sharing since day one of the war impressions and thinking together about the opportunity to, I would say, make it clear to the Australian public and New Zealander public about the precision of information that you've mentioned is all over the media, falsely presented. And what we are trying to do now is to try and contribute to the precision and reacting properly to false information. And I think one of the issues that Ambassador Maimon took upon him to show you the film is something that I would like, and I wanted John to give me the opportunity to emphasize on the evidence that we receive now from the returnees from Gaza, that the kids of under what we call bar mitzvah, kids of 10 and 12 and 7 were forced to watch the film you watched at the parliament. And just imagine.
Sorry, you just say that again. Kids of under 10 were forced
kids, returnees from Gaza, hostages who came back home, told us in Israel that they were forced to watch the same film that you watched.
Oh.
So that's something that I wanted to have your input on or your reply on this psychological warfare that they do, and how they torture, in fact, the psychological side of children.
Look, I really didn't want to watch that video because I had heard what was on it before I watched it. And but anyway, I thought that I sort of felt a sense of obligation to do so. And I'm 55 years of age, acted in council assisting. I've seen quite a bit of death in my time, and to show that video to most people, let alone children, is really in those circumstances, is despicable, I have to say. One of the other things that stick in my mind is, a part of the video was watching two young boys. They were brothers, and I reckon they would have been 8 and 10 or somewhere around there. And, they were in their underwear and, minding their own business, probably asleep. And then, the house was stormed, and we were watching CCTV within the house. And to watch these kids, run out of the house, and we didn't have audio, so we could only see the video, and they ran into the bomb shelter in the backyard, followed by their father. And two Hamas terrorists walked into the backyard and threw a grenade, maybe 2 grenades, into the bomb shelter. And the father must have been sort of covering the kids because the father was killed, and you could see he was killed. And the boys came running out. They were injured, but they had blood all over them. But the attacks on children, and we've seen despicable things of young kids. I said to the ambassador, because if I can say this with great respect, Israel, the governments of Israel have for a long time, I think, not prosecuted a good public relations exercise when things often go awry. And I I said to the ambassador, why aren't you getting this video out more broadly so Australians can see it, those who may want to see it with the appropriate warnings, etc. But Israel government often does not prosecute its public relations case well enough, in my view, and that's left a big sort of gaping vacuum that's being filled by the likes of the left-wing media and, of course, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, of course.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of work to be done in that regard, and I don't think anybody would disagree with me on the public relations, but of course you're welcome to.
No, we would agree with you, Andrew. In fact, I think one of the criticisms of Israel is it tries to be too nice, to keep the peace sometimes, when it really should be taking perhaps a more aggressive stance on letting people know what actually happens. Because if you're in the West here, unless you're on Israel Times of the Day or, a few of the other apps or things like that, we don't hear what is going on. The hostages were released at 6 a.m. and at 7 a.m. There were another 900 rockets come across, and they're asking for longer times. I mean, we don't hear those things. Anyway, we could go on. I just want to say in the half an hour, it's been wonderful. We're going to have Andrew again on Tuesday, the 12th of December, in our bigger SCAFI meeting. For those who'd like to join us, we'll get some more time with Andrew to discuss more things with him. But I just want to say thank you very much for this afternoon, Andrew.
Thanks very much, John. Can I just correct you on one thing, and that is that the Parliamentary Friendship Group of Israel that is continuing, that's been sort of in motion, and the Israel Allies Caucus is not born out of that. It is a different group. It's not associated with the Parliament.
John, I'd like also to add something I think most important. The team on top of the committee is Andrew and Peter Khalil, who is a great friend of Israel. So you have to know that you have also some great friends of Israel in the Labour side. I hope, Andrew, you don't deny that.
Well, I'd like to see them come out and be a little bit more forceful about it.
We rely on you.
And we will push from the side. Don't worry. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you
very much.
If you have to leave. If you want to stay on, please do.
I will leave. Thank you, John.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Andrew, just a quick one before you leave.
Yes.
You have here a colleague of yours serving also the State of Israel at the UN, Ambassador Kermon, who was deputy of the mission between 2:05 and 2:10, who's joining us now for the second half an hour. So you can say hi to him. He's here. Was Deputy Director General of Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Here you are, Daniel Kharmon from Israel. So,
well, look, I'm going to hang around for you, Daniel. I had the opportunity to meet with the Israel ambassador to the UN. We were actually in his office about 4 or 5 hours before the attacks on October 7, talking about counterterrorism issues. So it was very surreal to have that happen, only meeting the ambassador only a few hours beforehand. So I'll go on mute and I'll listen with great interest.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Okay, so it is an honor for me to ask my childhood friend, Ambassador Daniel Kharmon, a childhood friend of mine from Jerusalem, the capital, eternal capital of the Jewish people and the State of Israel. So, Danny, first of all, welcome, senior diplomat for the State of Israel since the 70s, serving Israel at the embassy in Washington, D.C., and was member of the Israeli delegation to the Camp David peace talks in 1978. From 83 to 1985, served as the commercial director of high-tech company in Jerusalem before returning to the foreign ministry and serving as deputy director to human resources department. From there, 89 to 95 at the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires as a consul and counselor and also administrative officer. I would like to pay tribute here to Eli, his late wife, a mother of 5 of his children who lost her life in the famous Buenos Aires embassy attack that we know that it is made by Hezbollah at the time, and was in a way the tragedy that we carry on until now. And now later Danny was appointed to be the head of situation emergency room in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. 96 to 2000 he was head of information and internet at the ministry. 2000 to 2005 was director of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Director General's Bureau, working, of course, with the minister. From 2005 to 2010, he was deputy permanent representative of Israel's mission to the United Nations. And 2011 came back and served as deputy director general and head of Mashav, the Israeli Agency for International Development Cooperation. 2013, very important to highlight, Danny was awarded the highest award of excellence of Israel's public service. Later on in 2014, Deputy Director General interim, in addition to his role as head of Mashav. And from 2014 to 2018, and I had also the joy to share with him a Leil Seder in Delhi. He served as ambassador of Israel to India. And then the only thing I have to still remains is to tell you that Ditza, his wife and mother of daughter Emma, is still a senior public servant in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and just nominated in 2021 as head of strategic policy planning. So without further ado, I asked Danny to speak today about his involvement on the ground during the war, and also to tell us a little bit about his international experience. Thank you, Danny. The stage is yours, as much as we can. The screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Eitan, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. If I can add, you read everything that I did in 45 years, and I appreciate it very much.
I wanted to show everyone that I can read English, so that's okay.
I want to add one little detail, which is that Emma, that you mentioned, is now a soldier on the Gaza border. She's on the Israeli side, but 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers from the Gaza border. And since October 7, she's been home 3 times for 24 hours or less. Last time she was here on Wednesday, she had 24 hours. After 16 hours, she said, sorry, I have to go back. I cannot stay home. And we took her back to the border. That's not part of my CV, but it's part of our lives, I guess. One more thing I'd like to, sorry?
I say, and your full responsibility as a father. What can you do?
I want to stress one thing. I was a proud civil servant for 45 years of any and all Israeli governments at the time. But since 2018, I'm not a civil servant anymore. So there are things I can allow myself to say that I definitely did not say during those 5 years, even if coming home and closing the door between me and myself, I had maybe other feelings sometimes, but I really look back at the career as something to be really proud of, regardless of Israeli or world politics. I served my nation. Well, we're retired, and as it happens with other retireds, they're sometimes looking for things to do and not sit idle at home. And I've joined, it's connected and not connected. I've joined a group of 500 generals, retired generals, in a group called Commanders for Israel Security. A group of the top of IDF and secret services during all the years, a group that is very well maintaining the consensus line of Israel's security, but also think that there are not solutions maybe, but the path to a solution has to go through various stages, which are not necessarily the line of Israeli governments, and it doesn't have to be with the same logic that says that after serving the country, you're a free person in a democracy and you say whatever you like. And I think that this group is a very important one, contributing to public opinion, and hopefully it will continue to do its job. In the last year, the group, by the way, headed by General Matan Vilnai, which Eitan knows very well, who was the #2 in IDF and ambassador to China also, after he retired from IDF. And you have the best names in this group of people. In the last year, they decided that you cannot do without diplomacy, and 50 of us, ex-ambassadors, joined this group, which is now comprised of 560 or 570 ex-Paul Mill experts. This terrible crisis, the war caught, of course, everyone by surprise, and the group is now, there is no one TV panel where you don't see a representative from this group in the panel, and it gives the security aspect from the sidelines. And it's very interesting to see how military and diplomacy people contribute to the conversation. It's really interesting and refreshing to see, but it caught the group by surprise because it had some long-term ideas of what to do with the Palestinian issue in general, and all of a sudden you, like the whole of Israel, have to join the war effort. Each and every one of us in its own, from its own angle. So it's very interesting to see, and I think it's also symptomatic of the fact that while being, and I admit to you that I was part of this very enthusiastic protest movement that I'm sure you heard about. On the 7th of October, protest was put aside, and all of us are engaged, all of us are engaged 24/7 to the war effort, each and every one of us in a different way. Since Eitan asked me to speak about that, I can share with you the fact that I'm with 2,000 volunteers. We joined an operation, an incredible civil society operation called the Forum of Missing and Hostage and Missing families forum. If you see around the world, and I'm sure you see around the world, the hashtag bring them home now, this is this organization. This organization that was established 24 or 36 hours after the start of this terrible war, with the idea of helping the families of the hostages and the missing in a situation and on the background of the fact that government was practically non-existent in this angle in the first few days. And this is something that is really remarkable, I would say. Excuse me. It is remarkable because in the same way that civil society was a model during the protest times, and I won't talk about the protest, in the same way, civil society showed its strength when government is active or parallel or is not active, like in the first 2-3 days. And it was a declared aim of this group. There was a few businessmen who lent their offices in central, in the city section of Tel Aviv. There were people experienced with hostage situations. The best, if Eitan, I'm sure, knows the names, David Meidan and Yaakov Peri, the best of the best ex-negotiators who came and lent their experience, judicial, sociologists, psychologists, mental health experts, finances, I mean, you name it, and thousands, 2,000 people say it's even more, of youngsters who left their work, left their jobs, were not enlisted in the army, so they could join the operation. And since then and until today, this forum is engaged with one thing from the perspective of civil society, and I think it's an example to be learned, to be investigated, how this can serve in other, God forbid, in other similar situations, if God forbid they happen. So so we added diplomacy to this, we added legal expertise to this, and we have in our minds only one thing: the families. We work with government. The government, you know, it took a few days, but then government established its own apparatus to deal with this terrible situation from the point of view of negotiating on the one side, and there is a big difference between a big gap, not gap, a distance between the negotiation part, which is operational, and I can say a word or two about that, and the family, dealing with the family, helping the family in any angle. People who, you know, in this situation, there are people who were in process of getting a second citizenship, and they had to expedite it, and there's a very large number of people, hostages, who have dual citizenship. And up to a very simple thing like, you know, paying a check or a bill. So you have a very vast array of activity, sending delegations. I know that a week ago there was a delegation in Australia of families of hostages. We're sending one to South America. We sent to Europe. It's like dozens of delegations of family members who tell the story of the kidnapping as much as they know, and their own experience, because all the families were there as families. It happened at 6, 7 a.m. People were, you know, in their beds. So this operation is really something remarkable, and I'm very happy that I can contribute my little, you know, 2 cents to this. And this is something that, again, if something not good, but something positive will come out of this terrible trauma that we're all going through. It's a show of strength, immeasurable strength that the civil society in Israel has. I think it has never happened this way in any part of the world before. I'm talking about the civil society. I just want to mention one more organization to which I joined virtually yesterday, only yesterday, an organization called Brothers and Sisters in Arms. Oh. Something incredible, an operation, again, hundreds and thousands, I don't know the number of people who are engaged in solving situations, very mundane daily situations for people who are around the Gaza Strip, but all over Israel, because the situation has impacted all of the country, not only the fronts on the north and on the south or on the east, but also impacted the economy, work, merchandise, basic stuff that people need. And there is a huge logistic operations by Brother in Arms. I remember 10 days ago, my daughter had to go back to the army, and I thought I couldn't take her back to her base, which is 2 hours from here. It's not Australian distances. I didn't know what to do, so I called Brother in Arms. And 10 minutes after that, the guy calls me back and he said, "Yes, how may I help you? What's your problem?" And I said, "This is what I need." He said, "Well, I'm sorry, I cannot do this and this and this, but let me suggest to you to," and then he gave me a solution. So this was a small example, but things that communities need, even sometimes, clothes, food, very elementary things, and even volunteering to work in agricultural communities. So this is civil society in Israel as we know it now, and I'm glad to be part of it, and I'm glad to share it with you.
Danny, I just wanted here to stop for a second and maybe call it a little challenge. What we've heard here is about two major organizations that took upon them such an amazing effort to give the solutions for the state of Israel. And let's not do the dirty wash here, but one thing that I would like you to elaborate from the soil of Zion and Jerusalem is about the fact that we all worldwide are hearing that it's the first time in the history of the state of Israel that the people governs the nation and not the nations, the people. Can you elaborate on that one? Because this is really an unbelievable hard work that so many thousands of people opening their own pockets, financing. You see top entrepreneurs in Israel are helping, opening the pocket and helping operations. And you hear that here there is a ministry, there is a ministry, they're doing well, but all in all, we are facing at the moment a new phenomena.
I'm not sure if it's a long-range phenomenon, but it is there, and you described it very accurately. Sometimes it's very politicized, of course. What people say are politicized, and they come off with the aim of where you sit is where you stand. And you hear things like, well, there's no government, and they cannot, I think it's very comfortable to some parts of government that those exist. I'm not talking about the hostages for Hostages Families Forum, because there is a parallel activity by government, and parallel, I was taught, never meet the two lines in part, but here we do meet from time to time. So government has recuperated in this aspect, maybe not the most efficient, but I'm not sure that we are the most efficient. But we're very, very, very active, and so is the government. There are many areas in which government has not woken up yet. I don't know if our audience here knows, but there is not only in the south, but also in the north, 200,000 people were evacuated from their homes in the north, which is a terrible thing when you come and think about, work, agriculture, cultivating, education for the kids. Some have been evacuated to as far as 100, 150, 200 kilometers to the Dead Sea resorts. So government has a lot of declarations about recuperating and rebooting and whatever, but none has been done. There was a law passed in the Knesset about a directorate that would take upon itself to rebuild the communities that were very hardly hit in the south. It hasn't started working yet. So I don't want to sound too politicized and to say government does not exist, because it's not true. It depends sometimes on the minister in charge. I can tell you that for example, the immigration activity is remarkable in Israel, and after the start of the war, it even became more remarkable. A minister of health, for example, is doing a great thing. Minister of education and his party, and first and foremost the army, which is also government.
Yes.
People, but it's also a branch. The military that has suffered a huge blow, which will be investigated in due time, and expect many people to leave their offices. We expect, and they also have already taken publicly responsibility. About 5 or 6 highest generals in the Israeli system have already publicly said, I was in charge, I take full responsibility. But now there is a war to win, and after the war, we'll go into implementing this responsibility. One person who has not taken responsibility is the person on the top of the agenda of the echelon, who's our prime minister. He knows, I'm sure, that he's responsible. He knows, of course, that he was responsible on the 7th of October because he's the prime minister. He is evading the questions about it, and when he cannot evade, he plays with words, but he unfortunately did not take responsibility on this disaster, this terrible disaster that our country is going through, never heard before in Israel, and let's hope it never happens again to anyone, because what we are going through is really, really terrible.
Yeah, we agree.
It's interesting that you mentioned, and you of course forgive part of government activities, and absolutely we know also to add the Minister for Welfare also is doing well, with the office. Something interesting that I saw, especially on studios, on the media, on TV, is that you see a rise of leadership. That we all say we are in crisis of leadership, but you see so many amazing leaders coming up to talk, to explain. The situation at the moment is that hiddenly, somehow we have leaders coming, like during the judiciary months protest, you saw amazing leaders coming up, hidden somewhere in labs, in universities, and professors and others who really took command and show that we have some very, very suitable and appropriate leadership for the future. And that's something that we have always to take into consideration. We have leadership in Israel, there's no question about it. Luckily, the two bodies that you are involved with.
Well, and also, Atan, we've had a couple of the young ones come on over the last few weeks, haven't we, from media and all sorts
Definitely.
of, you know, so some of those young people are really stepping up, not just the oldies.
Yes, you know, Danny, just a quick one to tell you. Just to tell you a quick one. We have here, we had in Australia a backpacker by the name of Mor Seagal. On the 7th of October, she was somewhere in Western Australia in the desert as a backpacker with a boyfriend who meanwhile was called to the army. But she took the mobile phone, and called all the channels in Australia and brought Tzipi Livni and Ehud Barak and others to speak to all the Australian medias. What an initiative. And she was on screen with us telling the story how she took initiative and really represented the cause for us. Yes.
I'm not sure, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to, you know, after we go through without allowing
You're breaking up, Danny.
National sentiment is really, really terrible. But I have to tell you one thing, and you know, just to pick up, Eitan has said, the way
we have a problem with your reception.
The way that this nation is reacting to dangers, to external dangers, is something that gives you, in the worst of times, gives you the strength to continue, even if you have Nazi, I have no other words. The Nazi neighbors in the Nazi Hamas people, we thought during all those years that we could solve things by, you know, making rounds of hostilities and calm for a few years, and we knew rounds of hostilities. But on the 7th of October, what has happened on the 7th of October? And I've not seen the videos, and they don't show the videos here in Israel. They don't show it. I've seen softer versions of the videos. This was hard enough. But the way these people is reacting is something, again, not to write or to study in schools. You see it in person. You see it daily. We, when confronted with a national challenge, we try to see things as they are. We mourn the dead and the missing. Hopefully will come, we don't mourn the missing, but many of them are missing, but they're dead. We do everything to bring the hostages back, and we do everything to eliminate Hamas military capabilities. And in this, you don't have coalition or opposition. You don't have anti-Bibi or pro-Bibi. You have the people of Israel fighting for its survival.
Yeah, well said, Danny. And thank you so much for coming on. We've reached the end of our time. We try to stay around the hour mark on a Sunday to give people time to go visit families and have dinners and things like that. So on that note, we'll finish our official part of the evening. Sometimes we stay on, people can stay on, particularly for those who want to pray for Israel or for hostages, or, Kingdom Builders is a Christian organization that works with, many Jewish organizations and many rabbis and Orthodox Jewish organizations. And we love to come together and pray together and stand with our brothers and sisters, not just spiritually, but physically, where we can. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of Kingdom Builders, and Atan always, he's just a great support, and he knows everybody, Danny. That's it. He always knows everybody.
Somehow along the way, you know, it's a long life. So you meet them on the way, as we say, on the footsteps of Moses. And I would like to say thank you so much to Andrew Wólאs MP for joining us, and of course to Ambassador Daniel Kərmon, all the way from Israel in a very early time in the morning before a very busy week. And we wish you all a long life and best as possible in these difficult times. And thank you for Friends of Israel joining us every week to know what is going on the ground. So thank you, Danny. Thank you, Andrew.